So we started our presentation with just trying to come up with an idea that helps our community, and not only just the community, but also the center. And one thing that stuck out really, um, really a lot during each classroom is you have new parents and parents who are new to the community, and they didn't have a lot of support or didn't know who to go to. So we came up with kind of a mentoring within our center. And I'll start. It says, have you ever felt alone? Have you ever wondered if someone else has experienced what you're going through? Have you ever just needed a bit of support to help overcome what it might be? Have you ever wanted to just have someone to talk to, someone just to listen to you? And with that, some people are just completely overwhelmed by either a doctor, a lawyer, DCF. So it actually gives them someone else to talk to on a more common level. What if you could be linked up to another family, mother, father, or guardian? What if you were told you weren't alone and there were others out there that could help and support you? In our center, we aim to set up families to another family that can relate, help, and support. It truly takes a village to raise a family and know that there are others around. This peer support can look like anything a family would want. And we have some examples. They could have resources, talking through child/family related situations, connecting with other families in the area, community events, childcare support, advocacy, safe venting and listening, confidentiality. All families that participate in the program volunteer to help one another on another level. These families that enter into the peer program have either been mentored by a peer, come from a background of support, and wanting to help others. They're willing to be connected to other families and have those families outreach at times in need of support. Families that are being mentored realize that these families also have families to take care of, and it's a give and take relationship. Families need to have compassion, understanding, and realization that each situation can be unique to its own, and our job is to help one another.
So that kind of overview is like our initial thinking for the program. And then I'm going to tap into like what this initial start to a peer program would look like. So families would be available to be paired up to families for mentoring and peer support. Families receiving support will be given a family to connect with. Families can choose from available families that they feel would be a good match based on biographies, backgrounds. All of that would be supplied for each family that is going into the mentor side. Initial connection will be made from our center specifically. And after enrollment and choosing of the family, it would be email and face-to-face that our role would play in, just to make sure that there is support and that families are feeling connected throughout this process. Families providing peer support will reach out to families once a month for a check-in. Families receiving peer support will have access to reach out to their peer as they need. Families providing peer support can reach out to the ARK Center for further support. If there's something that maybe they're not sure how to handle, they're just kind of needing to run it by, it'd be like Mandy or I, basically, that they would run through and we would, help tear it down. And then we as a center would reach out to these families receiving support and providing the support once a month, just to do check-ins, kind of in that, like pilot phase. This program would come at no cost to families to participate. And we would also help rematch families if a family was to leave the peer program for whatever reason. We would help initiate, if they wanted to go forward, another peer for them. And then we would also provide twice a year social gatherings, so that initially families who are on the peer program could have this common ground of connecting and establishing that face-to-face. And so Mandy and I's goals are very similar to this. And the goal of this program is to just connect and build relationships among families and build better support networks for families. The goal of this program is to allow families safe avenues to be able to connect with others that are also going through similar situations, whether grandparents, foster parents, single mothers or fathers, families, any way a family is made up of. Families need to feel supported around the whole big picture and not to feel alone along their journey.
So each family has their own way of doing things. So we do have some requirements for the mentors. Some of them are adequate listening skills, good open communication, some ideas about some outside resources or willing to look for resources. We need to have the child or children, could be of any age. They need to be willing to help advocate for families, willing to be almost an on-call. Mentors can exit the program at any time if they feel it's not working or they're overwhelmed. Families should provide a bio background so we could match them better. We also have a question about mandated training for basically emergency protocols, as far as like a mandated reporter kind of training. And can a situation be fielded out to directors for a judgment call if a report is needed?
So then we went a little deeper and we wanted to figure out what a pilot program would look like and really have that basic foundation set. So Mandy and I's capacity to kind of get this rolling, we felt comfortable with about 6 families starting off. So 3 families to mentor and 3 families to mentee. We would have a confidentiality form signed by all the participants so that they knew that their information was safe and that there was that connection that they have would be covered. We would run the pilot program for about 6 months and do once a month check-ins. At 3 months, we would send out a survey for feedback to see if there's any suggestions, what's working, what's not working, anything that they, might still need or not need. Matchups could consist of any variation. It's just according to what the family needs. And then we're tentatively looking to have this start September 2021. And we want to set up a social gathering in August before that happens so that families can kind of have that social piece and face-to-face so that they're not, trying to figure out who each other are. And then we've tapped into other like furthering partnerships to figure out how we can pull some of these resources and supports together so that it's kind of in a, easy guide or pamphlet or whatever so that they're accessible. And so we talked about, partnering up with the Vermont Department of Health and WIC specifically, because they obviously run a peer program. So what did they see that worked? What didn't work? What resources are they handing out that we could maybe mimic? We talked about reaching out to the college because they have a big brother, big sister program. And could we link up families with some of that? Pediatrician offices, obviously they have resources, but if a family isn't understanding the lingo or what's going on in the pediatricians, could we link up with them so that we could help that be a little more streamlined? And then fellow childcare centers, is there a way that, maybe another childcare has another resource that we might not have or know of a resource, and could we make this a community-wide partnership?
So, and our biggest why for this is because we want to help support our families and give them access to a bigger support system for hopefully successful parenting their own children and what may come ahead. We also want to build a better community and understanding for children and families, that it does take everyone and you're never alone. And the fact that you really need to be able to have that level of trust with somebody for a foundation to feel successful.
So then we use some scenarios that we've currently run into that Mandy and I are kind of doing this already. And so we've kind of pulled those scenarios out where we're like, maybe this family would link up with another family, or these scenarios are real things that people need support with. So For instance, we've got a single mom with a new baby, and the father is in and out of the child's life and the mother's life. And so she's super overwhelmed and trying to figure this all out by herself. We have some families who are going through a divorce. And so, they're super overwhelmed too and trying to piece this all together. And so can we link them up with somebody? We've got grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. We've got another single mom with a new baby and a school-age child with DCS involved. Can we link up somebody with them who could help them through some of this process? We've got brand new young parents with new babies who are figuring this all out. We've got parents with multiple children and then adding a new baby. We've got parents with children in extreme behaviors. We've got foster parents and children. We have new families that have moved to the area. Families struggling with job placements and having kids involved, multicultural and diverse families, and then families with extreme medical issues. So those are just kind of some of the pieces that had come to light of who are our families who are seeking supports and needing, maybe a little bit more. And so then we had some further steps that we were just kind of looking into and getting feedback from the peers, and if we were missing any ideas or creating some permission slips and confidentiality forms, those pieces. And then Mandy and I actually took this to another place within our center, and we started that this week. We created an equity and diversity committee within our center to help us be able to pull this together, as well as some other pieces that we are noticing. And so we've met once so far. Our plan is to meet twice a month. We're looking at more of a policy and education based committee. So far we have staff and parents involved. So we wanted to make sure that we could capture, a variety. And so
the staff is some older staff and new staff. So we have some younger staff that are participating and some of the older staff to get different perspectives.
So we're hoping to be able to bring this program, once that committee does our first task of some policy making, we're hoping to bring this program so that they can also help us with putting this program together and getting it kicked off for this summer. So that's what we've got.
Wow.
We'd also like to throw out a question we had about how to introduce our group to families. We have a teacher who really wants to bring it into the classroom. And specifically the book that she brought was The Antiracial Baby, and how to present that to parents without without taking a side, how to come at it with no bias.
So that came to our committee yesterday, that they would like to incorporate that book into their curriculum. And I agree, and I totally am for it. But we're also finding that a lot of people are still playing catch up in this whole thing and, learning along with us. And so how do we do it professionally, appropriately, and making sure that everybody's included and not feeling like I don't want them to be offended either, whether, we know it's not right, but I don't want to the whole point is not to offend and to be kind and respectful. So we that was one of our questions, because it came to the committee and I was like, oh, we're going to class. We should bring it to class and see if anyone has any ideas of how to professionally introduce this. And maybe we start with our staff first and then we work our way. But it was just an idea that.
I'd love to hear people's thoughts on both on the second one about introducing the Anti-Racist Baby book, but also, just as you were talking, I thought amongst your colleagues, Becky's done this great overview for new people moving into the community of resources. Maybe you guys could have access to that as a way of either supporting your mentors or something. I feel like there are a lot of, amongst the 10 of you, there are a lot of resources that could be shared. And I certainly was excited about the idea of this being something that many of the childcare programs in the county look at. So, I don't know, I'll open it up. Can you, CSL, do you want to call on us? Becky,
Yeah, we
you
can
remember?
see you.
Okay.
I'm just open, like, just turn the mic on and talk too, like super impersonal, or, you know.
Becky, who's the name of, is it Marissa from Uproots? Is that what it's called?
I don't know the company name, so you might, but it's Marissa is her name.
It's a professional organization consultation kind of person who came in and did a lot of work with us. And then a Black man named Michael has come on board too. I would really suggest getting perspectives other than white people's perspectives. It's a learning curve, and there's a lot to racism that I didn't understand that's more than just violence and being intentionally unkind. So there's a lot of woven pieces, and there's a whole process of feelings for white people to kind of understand. That's what I'm kind of learning in this whole process. And so it's an ongoing learning kind of thing.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I had to call my lawyer to yesterday just to make sure legally I was handling things appropriate. And I didn't realize that it had to go to that level, but he was really good about, there's a lot of gray area. They're currently working on all these laws and like regulations and everything that comes around this. And so I had explained to him how we were approaching and working things. And he's like, education's the best. He's like, everybody learns at different paces. And as long as you're not pinpointing back, he goes, that's the way to tackle it. And so that was reassuring, because it's like we all are at different levels.
I know, Becca, that you have a lot of the background from being a breastfeeding peer-to-peer consultant, and there's a wonderful woman in the community named Ingrid Pixley, who helped to develop the peer navigation program for families whose kids had behavioral challenges. She'd be a great resource, maybe.
Okay. My supervisor at the health department, Jillian, had also mentioned that there is a community, the United Way has a roundtable that's going on right now with a bunch of different people from different resources. And she wanted me to link up with them because she's like, they're trying to figure out how to push it all out. And if you're starting something like this, then they could funnel all the resources, all the, pieces to you, and then you could then pass it all on. So my hope and fear is that I'm going to be joining that roundtable, hopefully, so that I can discuss what we're trying to do.
It'd be great. I think that the head of the United Way is going to come because she was interested in hearing Kara's presentation in 2 weeks, and maybe she could do, if she's able to join us, do something about that equity roundtable too. I love the idea that you're starting small. When Jody and I first talked about a similar idea, was like for the whole community, it's everybody could have go 1,000,000 miles an hour all at once. And Jody said, well, maybe you should do something small first. And I'm thrilled that you all are thinking about it in these incremental steps. It makes so much sense to do it that way.
It was definitely a push. So like, if we didn't get families to mentor, and we could get mentees, then Mandy and I wanted to make sure that we had the capacity to be able to fill those shoes until we could get those pieces filled. So we felt confident with the smaller number to get going. And then as things take off, hopefully it can grow and include more.
I just emailed a link to everybody in the group of an article that we had found from a pretty good site that can probably give everyone some idea about racism that white people didn't understand
Oh, thanks.
or still don't understand.
Becca, when you said introduce anti-racist baby, can you explain what I mean, I don't want to sound dumb, but I'm just curious what you mean by, so that I think I know and I have an idea of how to help, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you mean.
Yeah, so at our committee yesterday for our equity and diversity, one of the staff members has the book. And so she had mentioned how she wanted to include it and introduce it to the children and also to the parents, since we want to come from the stand that everybody's included, that everybody is a person. And so obviously the book talks a lot about that. And so, but my fear is some parents might not see it that way, and they're not there yet to understand it that way. So how do I introduce this as a positive thing and not as a like, I'm brainwashing your kids that they can only think this one way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think back it up and go back to who are all the kids in your classrooms, in your community, and have teachers do some of that, like bring pictures of everybody's family and everybody's house so that everybody's included that way. And you can start talking about differences in that way, and also bringing in different books, feelings books, and, the book about the hair. I can't remember what the title is. But just a whole bunch of different books in your classroom that have, white kids and Black kids in them. And introduce that book at the same time. So it's not like a token book, if that makes sense, but more
Yeah.
like, here's all of these books. And if we read this one, and then what we did at the center was give everybody a copy of the book. So, but we also gave other copies of other books. So it wasn't just like, here's this one book. But I think if you back up and just talk about your community as a whole, right, and who everybody at your center is, and use inclusion that way first, it might
Okay.
be received better.
Mhm.
And two other things, I think it's awesome, and it sounds like an amazing process. And I live in Whiting, and so of course I'm excited that there's going to be some kind of something out there. And my nephew goes to your program, so yay. And then I had a question, which was, how do you screen who is going to be a mentor or not? So what if somebody that you're like, and then they say, oh, I want to do this. What do you do about that?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. And I'm hoping that I can maybe tap into like, my supervisor, Jillian, because obviously they have to screen peers and they have to work through that process and make sure
Right.
that it's an appropriate person. I'm hoping to rely on her a little bit through that process to be like, so if you have a red flag, how do you go about it? Or if you aren't 100% confident, what do you do? Because like, I know we get training all the time and we're learning things. But initially there has to be some kind of understanding. And I think with the understanding that like, if it's not working, the relationship can be severed, right? Like we have to have that understanding that this is just not working, or we're not having matches, whatever the case. And I think that would have to go through like an orientation process to be like, great, you passed, you can do this.
Oh, that's a
But
good
hey,
idea.
we're going to do a 6-month check-in. And if it's not working, just so I think, yeah, because not everybody has that
And I think-
personality.
Yeah, I like
Go
the
ahead.
idea of the orientation.
And that's part of why we're starting small, so we can pick them out. With the idea of expansion would be great to make it bigger, but to keep some control out at first.
Well, thank you both. We could discuss this the whole year. Actually, it'll be fascinating to see how it unfolds. And since Sarah was able to join us, I think we should let you go, Sarah. And welcome, Kristen. And Michelle, I think we said welcome earlier.
Have my
I could just
technical
say-
support person here, the lovely Rebecca.
That's one of her other job descriptions. This is TA
Yes,
support.
lovely technical support person.
It's gonna share
Oh,
screen. Is it already pulled up what you wanted?
Jackie had her baby,
Is it
if you haven't
inside?
seen.
PowerPoint.
Yay.
Okay, hold on.
11 pounds, 3 ounces.
Maybe pull it up
Wow.
because it wasn't on my desktop. It was just up here.
Yeah.
How long do people stay in the hospital after a C-section these days?
I don't know.
Mm,
It seems like things get faster and
3 days?
faster. 3 days.
Yeah, I stayed for 3 days for both of mine.
Mhm.
Yep, me, I was just gonna say the same thing.
Well, send her our love, please, if you're
Okay.
cruising over. I don't even know if people are allowed to visit anymore.
We're chatting anyway.
Okay.
Yes, I will.
Super. Now, how do I see the people? Do I not?
There you go.
Oh, all right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes?
Sweet. How would I start at the first slide? I am so comfortable with this material. It is honestly the technical part that's going to get me flustered.
You should be able to just do that.
That should work.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just wait. This computer is really slow. While I'm waiting for the first slide to pop up, I can just talk about my passion. I chose, thank you, coaching and reflective supervision at the Addison County Parent-Child Center. It's gonna, any second now, you're gonna see that. And why it's a passion of mine. So I started here at the Addison County Parent-Child Center with no experience in doing this job, just a super desire to be with my first daughter, who wasn't my biological child. I had to create a situation where I could be with her every day. And it was the Addison County Parent-Child Center. And I was super fortunate. And I knew I was fortunate, but I didn't realize at the time until they were gone, how lucky I was to have really dedicated, passionate, intelligent, kind mentors to sort of teach me this job. I've learned so much. I've learned so much on how to be with people, how to be with kids, how to be with families, what real justice looks like, what real equity looks like, how to sort of eliminate some biases and some language that I didn't realize was hurtful from my life. So then, over the years, those people retired, how dare they? And I was kind of tapped to say like, hey, can you teach some people what you've learned? And I'm not a teacher of adults, so there was definitely some rocky parts. And I went to my mentor, and so every week I had a mentor who was accountable and who was dedicated and passionate, and he kept me honest and on task. And so every other week we would talk about, my practice and my reflective supervision, and every other week we would talk about how I could help other people learn to be reflective, or if I was feeling like, hey, I'm handing these people a gift and they don't understand it's a gift and they won't take it from me and I'm feeling very frustrated. So over the years, I thought I just was, like inventing the wheel. I was like, coaching is very different than reflective supervision. And when someone comes to me and says, hey, can you do supervision with this person? And what that person really needs is coaching. I feel like we should be transparent and say, this is what coaching is. This is what reflective supervision is. And once you have all these pieces in place, after having been coached, then we can move into true reflective supervision. So this little slideshow is going to be about how at the Addison County Parent-Child Center, what my perception is around what coaching looks like and what reflective supervision is, so that we have some consistency. Bye guys. So some consistency around people who are mentoring new staff at the Parent-Child Center. So that's my passion. When I came here with no experience in working with kids and families, my passion was still building relationships, making connections with people, building community, making meaning with other people. I really like to dig into the process and say what I think the meaning is and have a back and forth. And that is why I love the reflective supervision part of coaching and reflective supervision. I like helping. I like encouraging people to realize their own potential. And again, over the last 2 decades, I've realized helping is different than rescuing. And people need to understand their own potential in their own time. Like, I can't want something for a person more than they want it, whether it's a coworker or whether it's a family I'm working with. So those are my passions for picking this particular project. Here goes. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. Woohoo. So this is the slide that basically helped me tease apart coaching and reflective supervision. And there are actually a lot of resources on both of these things, and they're different. So coaching is targeted professional development with specific goals addressing knowledge and skills. And so how I see this is when a new employee comes to the Parent-Child Center, we grab our handy dandy I'm home book and we say, hi, welcome, I'm glad you're here. This is how we do things at the Parent-Child Center. It's responsive to immediate concerns. So if a new teacher's in a classroom and there's the crisis du jour and they feel ill-equipped to handle it, unsupported, confused about if their reaction was correct, here's a spot where coaching can address that need. Similarly, but a little different, reflective supervision is focused on process. It's about connecting what we've learned through coaching with actual implementation of the process. And it's personal, it's one-on-one, it's about feelings. Coaching, not so much about feelings. I feel like coaching is nuts and bolts. Reflective supervision is who am I? What do I bring to this work? Why do I want to do this work? What do you think about how I'm doing the work? How do others perceive my work? I could honestly do supervision every single day. I really could. And, oh, I didn't bring in my reading glasses. So theworldbank.org, my outline for doing this, let me just tell you, was to like define what other people say coaching is in reflective supervision, and then have examples, and then how I see it. Like, when I'm coaching, what are some sentences I use? And when I'm doing reflective supervision, what are some sentences I use? So that was what this slide was attempting to get at. So coaching asks instructional experts to work with new teachers to discuss classroom practice in a way that is individual and intensive. It asks teachers to engage in a deliberate practice. A lot of how we learn here at the Parent-Child Center is really individual and autonomous. Like, we get to bring ourselves, we get to decide how we're going to show up. And I think that's great if you have these basic pieces in place. But if some of these pieces are missing, that showing up gets a little wonky and difficult to deal with. Coaching is strengths-based. So is reflective supervision. So coaching is not finding the new teacher and listing out all the things they're doing wrong. It's not, coaching is experiential. So when I'm coaching, I like to go to the book and say, hey, what do you think about this passage? What, can you imagine yourself doing this thing? How about a goal this week is you try to do that thing? For example, get comfortable with healthy, high energy play. Look for ways that you can put yourself in that situation, and then let's come back and talk about it next week. That's how I would imagine coaching somebody. Joint activity. When I'm a coach, I don't see myself as the instructional expert, which is why I put it in quotes. Rather, I see myself as a learning partner. Like, here's something I've tried. Go ahead and try this and let me know how it works for you. Or when you're observing a person, I notice you knelt down when that child was trying to tell you a story. And it's important because that tells that child that you respect their process and you value who they are. Things like that. And also coaching asks the more experienced teacher to kind of do the jobs that maybe are entry level. Like, maybe you're the one cleaning up the table while the teacher's interacting with the child. Maybe you're the one putting down the mats while the teacher is working through a situation of healthy, high energy. So a coach needs to be able to multitask, kind of do the task that needs to be done, but also keep an ear and an eye on what your new teacher is doing so that you can go back and reflect with that person, or coach about another thing they could have done in that situation. So these are goals for coaches specifically at Addison County Parent-Child Center. Relationship, relationship, relationship. This is actually not my idea. So in my next iteration of this project, I will give Margie Brickley credit for that. She is at Bank Street College, and she said when she is in a coaching or a reflective supervision role, she seeks to create a relationship with that teacher that they can go on down the road and give to another person. And I just find that beautiful. And so I want to do that too. Coaches ask open-ended questions, schedule observation regularly. I think this is an important goal because like we get busy, right? Chaos reigns, and we can get really focused on the crisis du jour, as I like to say, and holding to those appointments where your mentor teacher or your coach is coming in to see how you do your work shouldn't be anxiety producing. It's a moment to be a co-learner with another person who's there to help you out. And it's one of those things that over the time that I've been coached and asked to be a coach, it's one of those things that can fall off. And I sort of put it under the label of, it feels a little selfish. Like if somebody's out sick, or if a kid is having a particular problem, or if a family has, you know, we have to do a little damage control with what's going on in their life. We can say like, oh, this supervision thing isn't as important as all those other things. And every once in a while that can be true. But for the most part, in order to stay fresh and excited about this work, we really need to be filling up our own cup. It's impossible to pour from an empty cup. And it's taken me a long time to recognize that, and Howdy really helped me figure that out and to not feel selfish for doing the things that I need to do to stay good in this work. So you can imagine this one was tough for me. Practice active listening. So I'm always wanting to chatter and put in my 2 cents and relate about like, oh, I know a time or another story, or how about this? And coaching, there's places for me to talk, but there's a lot more places to listen or to try to read between the lines of what someone's saying. Using I notice statements feels less judgmental when you're giving feedback to people, especially if it's some place you want to change where you're doing real coaching. I notice when the van comes with 7 kids, your shoulders go up to your ears, and kids who have experienced trauma really are attuned to subtle mismatches between words and body language. So what is it about that van arrival?
Sarah, we're not hearing you. Can you still see us? We can see you.
Looks like her and Becky are both gone.
Huh. So I thought they were at the center and using the center's computer. Why don't
I
we
think
wait
I'll
a
say
moment or two
yeah,
and
all of our systems went weird at Mary Johnson after the power outage, so nothing worked like it was supposed to when it
Oh,
all came
dear.
back on.
yeah, I knew a lot of stuff was strange yesterday. I didn't realize it was still going on. I know Sarah didn't have it at home. So let's wait a moment, and if they don't come back, maybe I'll ask Sarah to do talking over her presentation the way some of you have done when you've talked over your PowerPoints, so that we can hear her, or she can maybe continue it after Kara does hers in 2 weeks. Let me just tell you a few logistical things while we keep our fingers crossed that they'll return. So we did talk with the folks at Castleton, and what we thought would be a good idea would be to have their Castleton faculty come as visiting lecturers from time to time so that we all got to know them before you sort of switch over to being their students. There's Becky's back. And I think it was you, Kara, who asked about, can you get off the email list? So they said, no, you can't, but you can start sending things to spam if you want to. Welcome back, Sarah. We were hoping that you would be we're thinking if we can't get this to work, Kristen said maybe the computer systems all over Middlebury are sort of wonky right now. That maybe your tech assistant could help you to do a voiceover on your PowerPoint. So, and if you had some specific questions, you're back. Do you want to try to keep going, or what's your desire?
I think so. Can you hear me? Can
We
you
can
guys
hear
hear me?
you.
Somebody can hear me. Well, how about if I talk and somebody waves at me? Turn the video off.
Ask if they can send.
Can you still hear me?
We can still hear you.
Okay, so I'll just read from my slides. Then.
Okay.
Okay. So, so the last goal that I'll talk about talks about parallel process. And parallel process is when coaches interact with teachers in the same ways they're expected to interact with children. It's a way to let teachers experience what we mean by terms and concepts. And that came from teachstone.com. My next slide just talks about resources. We're good. Resources that I used in the previous 4 slides. Of course, the I'm Home manual for providing therapeutic childcare. Effective coaching, improving teacher practice outcomes for all learners. And another thing from Bank Street College called the Coach Formative Assessment Tool. And that's something that coaches can reflect on for themselves in assessing how useful they might be to their mentee, basically. There's another resource called Coaching with Powerful Interactions. Some of the ideas and quotes that I've shared previously come directly from this book in a workshop that I went to at a 0 to 3 conference a few years ago. So now I want to talk about what is reflective supervision. Reflective practice is the ability to reflect on one's actions to engage in a process of continuous learning. Reflection is a uniquely individual and personal process. That's again from Margie Brickley at Bank Street College. Reflection is experiential and resembles mentoring. And so I say that because I think some places use the term mentoring and it looks very close to supervision or reflective supervision. So I just wanted to say that out loud. At Addison County Parent-Child Center, reflective supervision relies on a seasoned teacher paying critical attention to the new teacher's practical values and theories, which inform their everyday action. Reflective supervisors model self-examination of practice reflectively and reflexively. And it was a little wordy at the end there, but I wanted to include the word reflexively to sort of illustrate that coaches and supervisors and reflective supervision it's a fluid process, and meaning can change from the beginning of the meeting you're having with your supervisee to the end of the meeting. And it really is a supervisee driven process. So that was the reflexive part. Some, oh, so this slide, so pretty. It says reflective supervision requires presence. When you, the part of being a supervisor and reflective supervision, that can be difficult based on the example I gave a little bit earlier. When you are running from, you know, the 500th thing you did in your day, but it's really important and you know you need to keep this meeting with your supervisee, it's important for me to take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to go to the bathroom, get a drink, make my body and my words match each other so I don't run frenetically into a room with my papers falling on the floor and slopping my coffee all over the place. To just have a presence of, I'm here for you. This meeting is important to me. I'm like a capable, credible individual. That's what I mean when I use the word presence. Commitment. That's just showing up. You know, if I wake up one morning and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this day. Oh, darn. Like I have that meeting with my supervisee. Yep. Pull it together, Sarah. Get up and go to work. Reverence, just a deep respect for the process. So sometimes when I'm doing peer supervision with a coworker, I go back and forth between saying coaching statements and leaving space for reflective supervision, depending on who I'm sitting in the room with. And I like to be really transparent. And so for me, that process of flopping back and forth feels uncomfortable and strange, which was another reason why I just really thought having this document would be useful to people so that we can just start saying other key phrases that we use around here. For example, oh, this is a courageous conversation. In a meeting where I'm doing reflective supervision, if I feel that it's really important that I switch to coaching, I can just say, oh, like pause for a second. This is a moment where I'm just going to put on my coach hat and say, and then fill in whatever I need to say. That's kind of where I was going with the reverence and deep respect for the process, to kind of reserve judgment and frustration for the fact that it's not my process. It's the process of the person who I'm sitting in the room with. Mutuality. Both people have to really buy in. If somebody's there and doesn't want to be there, it doesn't make sense to really do that meeting at that time. Okay, and I will get this up on, hopefully, on Canvas tonight, but the next slide is a graphic around the cycle of reflective supervision. So you have the experience, somebody observes the experience, somebody reflects on the experience, then you form ideas or solutions or possible interventions to try, then you test it out. It's like the scientific method. And then somebody comes to observe, or you do self-observation, and then you reflect on how it went, and then you tweak the process if it's not quite right, and you just keep going around and around until you get it just the way you want it. Goals for reflective supervisors, mentors at Addison County Parent Child Center. Number 1, practice using strengths-based language in all situations. Get really comfortable talking about feelings. How does a teacher feel about their relationship with children, with families, and with coworkers? Settle in with silence. While people reflect at different paces and at different levels, and so when we're asking people to think about who they are in a room with children, or what they bring to an experience, or how they perceived an experience, or how something landed on them, they might not have been wondering about that, or they might not have had any time to think about it. So the time they're taking to think about it in the silence of your meeting together is required. It's not a time to fill in the empty space with words. And again, that's something that I have come to get better at over time. Model telling your story. It builds relationships and it helps teachers connect with their own story. Learn to ask reflective questions, ask how and why questions. They help teachers clarify their purpose, their stance, and their own goals. An example, I'm curious, why did you choose this goal? And then the person answers, cool, how do you plan to implement this goal? Become a learning partner with the teacher asking for supervision. Some resources that I have either relied on over the years or just found recently that helped me come up with those brilliant ideas. One of them is appreciative inquiry, and the other one is narrative supervision. So components of both of those styles, I think, are useful in reflective supervision. I actually went to high school with this woman named Barrett Gordon, and just in I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I'm wondering, do you want to do a time check for us, Sarah, since we've had a lot of interruptions? I know some people may have planned on leaving at 5:30, and we would love to hear the end of what you're doing.
Yeah, so the end of this part is the resources. So I use to talk to think about reflective supervision. So I'm done. 11 slides.
Wow. I'm so anxious to actually see them. It was great hearing you talk through the rest of them. Do you have questions that you'd like people, when you post them, to respond to?
Well, can you hear me? I was curious how clear or fuzzy the distinction between coaching and supervision came across. I was curious if you feel that coaching needs to be separate from supervision, like in your own work or in work with other people. I feel pretty strongly that it does, but I've come across people who don't. So I'm just curious what other people think. And then I'd also be curious if anybody has come across a resource around coaching or reflective supervision that I haven't mentioned that I could look into more.
Great. So I hope that people will respond to those questions that Sarah raised when you take a look at her work. It was really thrilling to me, because after hearing Jim Squires talk about the strength of Alabama was that they had this separate sort of coaching and reflective supervision system, and that both were really important to, because they were fuzzy. They've been fuzzy in my mind about what's different about them. So I found this.
I actually looked at that work after he mentioned it. It's in my list of resources. It's pretty cool.
And do you want some more time, not next week since we're not meeting next week, but the week after, to hear us talk with you in person?
Well, I feel like because I always have technical difficulties, I take more than my share of time, but if it works for other people, I would love that.
I think we would love to offer that to you too. I know how frustrating it is to be in the middle of something and it stops working and it comes back and it stops. So to have a chance where things feel a little bit coherent. And I hope I speak for all of us to say we'd love to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, I think I would be ahead of you, Sarah, or behind you. It doesn't matter to me. My speaking part can be as quick or as long as people want it, because I'll post all my students' work for you guys to view on your own. So it's, if you want to go ahead of me or behind, it doesn't matter to me. You figure it out and let me know.
Thank you, Cara. It's honestly, that's your time, so I will defer to you. Like, maybe we should start with you. How about we do that, since I already had my time? We'll start with you, and when you're through, I'll use what time's left. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Becca and Amanda, for thank you all for actually rolling with. We've had incredible technical difficulties. Everybody has, as we've gone along, and someday we'll all have broadband. Someday we'll meet in person. Things will be wonderful. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Please be in touch if there's anything that you need in the in-between times. And Sarah, I feel a little I feel uncomfortable that I've not given you enough time today. So I hope it's going to work, that you'll get a little more time next time.
Well, I just want to thank you. I have said more than one time today, I appreciate first class and you being so flexible and everybody being so cool while I catch up with the technology part. I think I need a couple of things, one better broadband and one a new computer, a new laptop. I'll work on that.
We'll-
Thank you.
We'll put the word out for you. Thank you. Thank you all very much.